So many of us use Airtable to track projects and really just for project management. And frankly, there's no better software out there to manage your projects than Airtable. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down 5 key elements that will help you get the most out of using Airtable for your project management. So if learning about this is of interest to you, stick around and let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth and this is Gantt Consulting. It's our mission to help you get the full potential out of your no-code tool suite, and Airtable is one of our favorite no-code tools in 2024 and beyond. Now, before we get into the heart of things, I first want to invite you to join me for some Airtable training. So if you are new to Airtable, or if you've been using it a while, but you know there's more to it that you just haven't unlocked yet, check out my free Airtable crash course. You can sign up for this at gappconsulting.io/airtable-crash-course. Just put in your email and we will send you that crash course over the course of a few days. But without further ado, let's hop on into the heart of things. We are talking about using Airtable within project management. And my first big takeaway or my key tip for you is getting the right structure for your project management setup. So here's what I have on my screen. Let's go ahead and dive on in. These 4 tables are what I think of as being the top 4 that are going to be used in pretty much any project management. They are clients, contacts, projects, and lastly, tasks. Now I'm going to break down some of the different features for each of these. Now, clients is the organization that you're doing a project on behalf of. And sometimes you might get rid of the client contact here. So if you do a lot of B2C, that is business to consumer projects, well, then you might not have this relationship where you link your contacts back to your clients. However, in most use cases, you will want to break this into different places because it's very likely that you'll have multiple contacts that are associated with one account. And furthermore, you might do multiple projects for one account. So for example, let's say you do work for Acme Company and you know 10 different people at Acme. Well, you might work on 10 different projects. Heck, you could work on 20 different projects over the course of your business with working alongside Acme. And so the main contact for each of these projects, the main client contact will be different, but will be related to the organization. And so that's the big takeaway here and why we break it out into 2 different tables. Again, clients, contacts, and then projects. And as you would probably guess, most projects are linked to multiple tasks. And at the task level, and we're going to be talking a lot about task management here, we've got a setup that says, hey, how many hours or days does a thing take? What are the dependent tasks for it? What is the start date and what is the end date? But also very important, who is it assigned to? And then what is the status of that actual task? Now we're going to dive into this in more detail in our upcoming features in this video. But for now, we just need to understand the basic structure. And a key takeaway going back to our idea of clients and contacts is that clients, that is the organizations, these are linking to contacts and they link to projects. Contacts, similarly, is linking to clients. It has to be because we know clients links here, and then also linking to projects. So when we get to the projects table, we're going to see it's basically linking to everything, right? A project is linked to clients, it's linked to contacts, and it's linked to tasks. But here's the thing I really want to highlight for us. We want to make sure that we do not link a project to a contact that is not at an organization. So for example, here we only have one contact. Test client. This client is linked to Acme. So when we create a project and we link it to Acme, we don't want to see a list of all the other contacts in our database. We only want to see contacts who work at Acme. This has to do with setting up dependency rules inside of our linked relationship. And here's how we do it. When we are in our projects table, we say, hey, hold on. When you're linking a contact here, we want to make sure that we filter it down so that you can't see everything. You can only see contacts where the client is linked here. And so this is called a dynamic filtered link. And we say, hey, you're only going to see information here that pertains to Acme's different linked contacts. So for example, let's say I throw another one in here. This will be test 2. And if I link this now to a different client, let's say we link it to Delta, notice that there are no contacts linked to Delta. If I go back here to clients, I have no contacts linked to Delta. So when I'm in my project here and I'm linking here to a contact, I see no results. It is filtering out any contact in my database. This is super, super important for building your proper structure. It helps with data integrity and making sure that you don't link to the wrong thing at the wrong time. Key takeaway number 2, now that we understand the proper structure that we set up for our data, let's talk about date dependencies. I told you we'd come back to this. Now, we currently have set up a duration field. This is a duration type set to days. And in fact, I've named it hours, so let's rename that so that it makes more sense. It's days. So I have here, it's really just, it looks like a number, but Airtable thinks about it differently on the back end. So in order to set up date dependencies, make sure that you set this up as a duration field. That's one thing that you'll need. Now, you're also going to need, at a minimum, a start date and an end date. These are required if you want to set up the date dependencies. And these are just date fields. Nothing fancy about these. I just create a date field. And if you want to display time zone, I think it's easier if you do. Make sure to add it here. You can include time if you want. You don't have to. This is required, though, for you to set up your date dependencies. Now, the fourth component here is the dependent tasks. So for us, we've linked back to our tasks table. So we're saying, hey, look, this task right here, task number 3, it's linked to task 1 and task 2. And if you're going to complete task 3, well, you need to make sure that task 1 and task 2 are done first. This is going to be really, really helpful when we set up things like Gantt charts and timelines. We're going to be able to trace the dependencies through those different view types. So if you want to be able to do this in your Airtable project management database, make sure to set up your dependent tasks. But we're not quite done. Once we've set up these fields, now it's time to actually alert Airtable that we want to use date dependencies. So in order to do this, we come down here to the bottom and we click on the configuration for this. And here it is. We have date dependencies set up already for the table of tasks. That's the table right here where we're setting up our different tasks. And we have to then set it to the start date, map it to the end date. Again, the duration field here, this must be in days, as I was telling you. Make sure that your duration field is in days for this specific feature. And then also to our predecessor field, that is, if you want it, an optional fourth linking here where we say what things depend on. Now here we can toggle on or off whether we want to omit the weekends and holidays. And if we want to, we can add additional dates in here. So if I wanted to come in and say, hey, look, Christmas, this day we want to get rid of. We don't want to include it in our calculations. Make sure to toggle that on. Now, one additional and new feature that Airtable has just pushed out is the ability to put some more advanced scheduling or rescheduling logic in. In order to demonstrate this, I've gone over to the Airtable blog and you can see that they have a few different types here. The one that is default is the flexible. So this is using defined finish to start dependencies between records, and it shifts record dates when they otherwise violate a dependency relationship. So if you set up a dependency where you say task 2 relies on task 1 to be complete, then task 2 can't start until after task 1. And so by putting this in, you'll make sure that if you change task 1 and you push it out into the future, task 2 will shift accordingly. This is pretty typical, but you can get more advanced. And also I want to point out that if you use other tools like Asana and Monday, these are going to be very similar to those different tool types. So fixed is for business plans only. The fixed type here says it will define dependencies between records with any of the 4 dependency types. So finish to start, which we already talked about, also start to start, finish to finish, and start to finish. So you can set up a lot more advanced rules for this. You can also use buffer fields to set a lead or a lag for a dependency. So you can say, hey, after tasks are done, we need to wait a day. Maybe they have to go through a review before you can do the next thing. So this is an advanced feature for the higher paid plan, the business paid plan or above in Airtable. And then you can also do none. So on this, you can define the finish to start dependencies between records, giving you much more control than just the standard flexible. And you can also opt to never automatically shift record dates, even when dependent records overlap. So lots of possibilities for you. However, again, I want to emphasize that to unlock the more advanced features here, you do need to currently be on that business plan or better in order to see it. The third key takeaway from this video is understanding the feature about timelines, but more importantly, using a timeline with a utilization calculation. So imagine this scenario. We've got people on our team. We want to make sure that we don't overburden them. If we give them more work than they can handle in a related time frame, they're not going to get any of it done. Everything's going to break. Let's make sure that we can monitor our utilization rates and keep people fully busy, but without overbooking them. In order to do this, we're going to create a timeline view inside of an interface that we can share with others. But before we get to that, we first need to add a new field. So I've added inside of my tasks an hours. And the important thing here is that you use a number field. If you're using duration like this one over here, duration is not the same that you might expect it to be the way that Airtable thinks about time in the background. When you put time into a duration field, Airtable's calculating seconds, and that could cause problems for you. So make sure that when you build this field, you are using a number field. It's going to make everything easier for you. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually assigning a value, a numeric value to the amount of work I think that these tasks are. Let's say that task 1 takes 4 hours of effort, task 2 will take 8, and task 3 will take 20. Now, we have these numbers inside of our system. We can go on to the next. So we're going to set up an interface that does a summarization here and says, hey, on this particular day, this person is only 20% utilized. I can look at the other people on my team as well for these other tasks and see that they are underutilized. We have plenty of room in our example to add additional work for these folks. Of course, here on this particular week, we can see that Gareth is 100% utilized, so we better not add anything else to his plate for this time. We can even color code this utilization calculation so that it shows up better and we get warnings if someone is under or overutilized. Let's dive in. So inside of Airtable, we want to go to the interfaces. If you are new to Airtable, this is what an interface page looks like. We can collapse that little side panel, but we've built a couple of different interfaces for our examples here for this video. So here we are, we create a new page. You can do that up here, add new page inside of this. And if you're not seeing this screen, it's probably because you're inside of the data components of Airtable. And you can see up here at the top, you can click to access interfaces. The value of using interfaces and sharing interfaces is that you can limit what people see and make sure that they can only edit the things you want them to edit. It is the ideal way for any type of solution to be deployed to a team of more than just 1 or 2 people. If you're sharing this with an organization, which you probably are, you're doing project management, please build yourself interfaces. You will thank me later. All right, so back over here, we would click to interfaces and we're going to get to something that looks like this. We will add a page, as I said, and what we're going to do then is choose to display records based on a view type of timeline. It looks just like this. If you're doing it from scratch, you'll say add page and you'll say timeline. Super simple. Now, inside of the timeline, it's going to display whatever table we pointed at. That's called our source. For us, we're going to look at our tasks. So over on the right-hand panel, if you don't see that right-hand panel, you have to click in here, click into this big element that is outlined and shaded. And once we're in there, we select the source of the data. And we have a bunch of different tables. We have to pick the tasks table. Under here, you're going to see that we're looking at the visualizations of timeline, but we're not quite done. In order to add that utilization calculation, we have to drill in a little bit further. Now, right now, if you see where I have currently selected, I'm selecting the entire page element. As demonstrated by up here in the upper right corner, it just says page. You can also look at the blue outline because I am in edit mode for this interface. This is a little bit difficult if you've not used this before. So if you do get a little frustrated, just take a breath and always go back to check where are you currently looking? Right now, if you, again, use the tips I just shared, in the upper right corner, it'll tell you you've selected the page. Well, I need to drill in and update some information about the timeline element. Not the whole page, just the timeline element. In order to access that, if I hover over here and click, you'll notice that we just had a shift. I drilled down a layer from the page at the top level. I drilled down into the timeline, and it's kind of nuanced, as I've said. So if you're not looking for it, you might not know where to find it. But now I'm inside the timeline block or element itself, and I get more control over how I want to display that. The first thing I want to do is come down in here and decide what fields will be visible. I can choose to add the assignees here. I can add the days element. And by making that addition, it's just going to show more data here on the left-hand side. I don't need to show the days. I don't need to show anything other than the name, so I'll leave that alone. I do want to group it. I want to group it by assignee. This is a field type in Airtable where, depending on who I've assigned this to, they're going to show up here on the left. Right here, you can see I've got tasks assigned to 2 different people, and that's why it's grouped that way. But I want to look at the utility or the summarization of the resource. In this case, the resource utilization is based on the individual who is assigned these different tasks. All right, so make sure you group by that. Now we're going to come down and click on summarization. How do you want to summarize the data that's here? Well, I want to choose the utilization summary. This is kind of hidden again. If you didn't know it was here, you probably wouldn't know where to look for this. So set up the summary of utilization, and then it's going to ask you, well, what are the hours required? Note, this is why we built that new field. So I'm going to that number field. The field must be a number, as it says. You see that right here. And how many hours are we dealing with in our calculations? Do we say every resource has a certain amount of availability per week? Do we say per day? Well, you get to make those decisions, right? So we can say, in this case, we've got people going, they work for us week over week. They have a certain number of hours available in a week. So here's where we get to select how many hours that is. We can set up and say, hey, here's an assignee. They've got 20 hours available per week, per day, per month, whatever we want to do. So for us, we're using 20 as the number. We're assuming all of our resources in this situation are part-time. All right. Now, from here, we can go down and choose to label it. We can add color conditions, and I love this. And we can also choose to show it in certain groups, or we could also do a bottom summary bar if it made sense. It does not make sense for utilization rates. So back to the thing that I love, adding color. Let's make some conditions here. We can say where the summary or the utilization calculation is greater than 100. Anytime that we have utilization that is over 100, let's say 90 so that we know we're getting close, and let's flag it. Let's make it orange. If we scroll over here, you're going to see that here, in this particular situation, I am over capacity. Maybe we don't want to plan utilization over 90% or over 80%. Whatever that number is for you, set up conditions so that you can change the information, visually changing the color, making it easier for people to implement. Once you're done with this, publish it and share it with anybody that you want to share it with on your team. That way, everybody knows what the utilization rate is for the different folks and how that's spreading out. Let's do a quick sanity check to understand what the actual summary is doing for us. Here I am on task 1. You can see it's saying that I'm at 20% capacity. If we go back to the data and take a look at it, we've got task 1 here. It has 4 hours worth of effort, and it's over a 2-day period from the 1st to the 2nd. So 4 hours worth of effort out of 20 hours available in the week is the 20%. So on the days where we have that task assigned, that's 20% of our availability for those particular days. That's how the calculation's happening in the background. Make sure you understand it before you implement this type of solution. The fourth key takeaway to know about is all about Gantt charts. Now, Gantt charts are not readily available inside of Airtable interfaces in the way that I would hope to see them. You can access some Gantt adjacent elements, but not a proper true Gantt chart with the dependency lines and all the pieces tracing through. This instead is still reserved specifically as a view type in the Datasource. This means that it will only be shared with people who have access to the underlying database. Note that I'm back in the data section. I am not in interfaces. Only builders should be in the data section. Those are the people, the admin, the people who built the solution, not the everyday users, but the people who put it together and oversee things. So here's a Gantt chart. This is what it looks like in Airtable. You would select it down here in a view type and you'd build a new view type. And it's going to ask you for some settings. You're going to set up the start date, the end date. You'll also filter whether you want all calendar days or only work days on the Gantt. You can omit holidays. You can establish milestones. You can put the linking viability between predecessors or successors. And most importantly, my favorite feature is bringing in the critical path. So here we are, we've got this test project. It has the 3 tasks, and we can see that task 3 has 2 dependencies here, and the critical path actually goes from task 2 to task 3. This is the one that we have to wait on. When task 3 is done, then task 3 can begin, because presumably the way we've set up our Gantt chart, task 2 is after task 1, but task 3 relies on both of them to be complete. So these are the types of insights you'll be able to draw from a Gantt chart, again, kind of at that management or builder level. And a true Gantt chart is not yet available inside of interfaces as its own view type. As I said, it's only here inside of the data structure itself, and this is how you build that. The final takeaway I want to leave you with is understanding record templates. This is another kind of under the radar feature that Airtable has. It's going to unlock some serious power for you when you're building projects and tasks and their respective relationships. So how does this work? First, you need to build a template. What is a template? Well, it can be the creation of one or more records based on some specifics that you put into it. So for our example, we're going to assume that when we create a project, we always want 2 very specific tasks to be created and attached to that project. Here's what that looks like. In order to get this started first, we're going to be in any part of the database itself, not in interfaces. We'll click on Tools and we'll click on Record Templates. That opens up this side panel right here, and we can add a new template. So inside of this, we will get an interface modal similar to this. Here I'm saying I want to add a new record at the project level. So when I set up my new template, I first have to decide, what are you creating a record for? So for me, I said I'm creating a project, and then I can create the subsequent tasks linking to that project. So in this, we name the template. For me, this is project type 1. And I can put anything here in terms of what do I want to create for this record. Like I could give it a very specific title every time we create it. I could say it's called new project, full stop. Or maybe I leave this blank, and that way the user can fill this out. Now over here, I also want to build a relationship to tasks. In order to do this, I say, hey, I want to link to another new record anytime we choose to initiate the template. So what will it do? It will create the project, and in my case, 2 tasks related to that project. We also have the option of linking to an existing record. So I could say, hey, when I initiate this particular template, I always want to link to a specific client or a specific contact. I don't want to do that. I want that part to be malleable. I want my users to be able to choose what's happening on that side. So unfortunately, this is hard coded. I can't say link to an existing client and then allow them to choose that client every time. If I make a selection here, every time the template runs, it will be this client. So this is something I hope they update in the future, where I get an option to say link to a client of your choosing. Right now, we can't do that in templates. What we can do is create new records under very specific settings. And in my case, in particular, as I create tasks, I'm actually going to be calculating the start date based on some relative dates. So I can say the start date of the first task is always going to be the current date. It's always going to be assigned to Gareth, and it's always going to take on the status of planned. And I can also put in the number of days and or the number of hours in terms of effort that this will be. It will always link appropriately to the record that initiated the template. So I've created 2 tasks based on 1 project creation. And now the important part is tying this into my interface so that my users can easily create new projects. So here I've added a button up here on my timeline. Pretty cool stuff. Inside of the edit mode, we will just go into this. Again, I'm on the page level right now. You'll see that. And I'll scroll on down to add a button. And that button, I'll choose to go to the button properties and I say open record creation form. That is this option right here. Now down here, I assign the template. So the template must be built first, and then I assign it to the form. And I can also limit this and say that only records created will be from the templates, right? Maybe I don't want people to create records without using a template. So I can toggle that on and publish. And here's what happens when we do this. Here I am inside of my lovely little interface here, and I can add a project. Remember, it's going to ask me for the name. I'll call this name of test 2, and I'll create it. And remember, this is going to immediately create not only that new project, but also 2 tasks and assign them. Here's that first task. It was task for new project. It's going to be assigned with today's date. If we look right here, I'm recording on the 28th, and this was just assigned right here to me. Task 1 for new project, task 2 for new project assigned here. Now you can put together a lot more fancy interfaces as I've done. We can drill into the tasks. And here's why I recommend doing this. Now I can go into that new project and update things like the client and the contact. Unfortunately, when using that record template, I don't have that luxury. So now I can come in and say, oh, this is for Acme. And remember back to the very first takeaway from this video, we have made sure that contacts will only relate back to the clients. So we're not going to see all the contacts in our database, only the contacts that are associated with Acme. And there it is. I can add more if we had them, but in this case, that's it. I know we went really fast here. There are a lot of options when it comes to Airtable for project management. I've tried my best to put as much information in here as possible while also getting through it in a timely manner. If you had additional questions though that we did not cover here, please feel free to reach out. The best way to get a hold of us is to swing by our website. And of course, it doesn't hurt if you subscribe to this channel and give us a big thumbs up. I hope you got a ton of value from this video here today, but most importantly, keep on building.